First slide I want to point out is always our district goals: practice fiscal responsibility, increase student achievement, improve transparency throughout our communities. We think that this following presentation really enunciates the second and third goals. Obviously, we're focused on student achievement, but third, we need to talk about the report card in its good, in its bad, and in its ugly forms. And we are committed to presenting information to the public, whether it is flattering to us or somewhat complimentary to us. It's important that we always share and that we always explain and that we always tell our story. So anytime we talk about the state report card, whether it's good or whether it's bad, we have to make sure that we're very consistent in the perspective we articulate. And I think right there, not our words, but the actual words from the state of Ohio on the report card website tell the entire story. Report cards are only one part of the story. To get a fuller picture, we encourage you to visit schools, talk to educators, parents, and students, and review the schools or district's webpage. A lot of great things are happening every day in Ohio schools. It says that right on the cover page of our report card site. Report cards are similar to batting averages in baseball. It is one data point. If you only looked at a player's batting average, you would miss how many home runs he's hit, you would miss how many RBIs he's hit, you would miss how many stolen bases. He's a gold glove outfielder. You would only have one data point. And so it's very important that we always accentuate that, whether we're proud of our report card results or whether we think they're very negative. So we open that, or our presentation, with that reminder. This year we had an overall grade of C. And when you look at a C, okay, how does that compare? And I think it's always important to contextualize. If you see right in the middle there, the C was actually the plurality of school districts in the state of Ohio received an A. Received a C, meaning 231 school districts, or 46% of school districts in Ohio, had the C that Parma had. In terms of neighbors, Berea, Brooklyn, Brunswick, North Olmsted, all with a C as well. So we're very competitive in terms of neighboring districts and actually some districts that folks think, have more to offer than we do. We're right there with them, and that's important because ultimately we want to be a strong community. We want to be a community in which our neighbors, in which our families, in which young families believe in our schools, believe that they want to invest and stay here. In terms of overall grades and with specific to C's, we had a number with specific to schools. We had a number of schools actually earn B's. So we're very proud of Densler, Green Valley, Hillside, John Muir, and Ridgebrook. We also had schools that improved their overall letter grade. We're most specifically proud of John Muir, who raised their grade from a D last year on the 2018 report card to a B on the 2019 report card. Normandy increased by 1 grade. Renwood increased by 1 grade. So we're very proud of the progress that our schools are making. If you look here, there are 6 different component grades that actually fit into the overall grade that we receive as a district. So we have achievement, we have progress, we have gap closing, we have graduation rate, we have increasing K-3 literacy rate, and then our final is prepared for success. What I indicated to you, and Mrs. Marvin touched on this earlier, what's interesting is that 2 of those measures are always 1 year behind. So the graduation rate and the prepared for success actually reflect data that was collected from the end of 2018. It's not reflected in the 2018 report card. There is a lag time. So when we talk about progress, we have to realize that progress was actually made 1 year ago. We're hopeful, and really more than hopeful, we're encouraged by the results that we've seen that we'll continue to make progress in those regards. In terms of progress, we also want to accentuate, as Mrs. Marvin reinforced before, our progress grades are actually based on data over a 3-year period. So as she indicated, sometimes if you make changes, it's going to take a while to run through that 3-year cycle for the data actually to catch up to that state report card grade. What you see underneath, too, are the different components within each grade. So, again, I don't know the exact figure that is spent on state report cards. But in terms of the bureaucracy that goes into calculating all of these grades, if you printed out our state report card, it would be at least 37 pages long. So Mrs. Marvin was doing an excellent job before talking about where do we spend resources. The amount of resources that are put into calculating all of these different indicators are immense. This also is a chart that details some of our component grades. What's important to point out here is that our progress grade, and I'm going to talk about why I want to emphasize this in a second, our progress grade actually weights more heavily. Remember, that's the grade that is supposed to reflect, did a student make 1 year's gain? That was originally how the progress component was billed. If you started out here, even if you weren't passing the test, if you started at, say a D level in the 4th grade, if you were still a D level in the 5th grade, you were supposed to kind of count as a C for progress because you made 1 year's gain. Even though you weren't quite proficient yet, you made a year's gain. Everybody thought that was fair. Everybody thought that was a great way to judge schools. We're going to talk in a few minutes about what the progress grade actually looks like. From achievement, that's also a 20%. That is 2 different numbers that go into that achievement grade. First is performance index. We'll talk about why I value performance index so much. And secondly, percentage of indicators met. Most schools in Ohio are receiving a D or an F in indicators met. To meet an indicator, in most cases, you have to have an 85% passage rate of any standardized test. Most school districts are falling short of that very high bar in terms of the 85% passage. Gap closing is 15%, graduation rate 15%, improving at-risk K through 3 readers. Now again, most people think of that as, are we meeting the 3rd grade reading guarantee? And it's actually not. What they look at is a couple of different cohort models to see if students who were not performing at a 3rd grade level, can we get them to perform at the 3rd grade level? So it's not about the overall actual score. It's about, did we make gains with students who were off progress, or off track, I should say. And then finally, prepared for success, which is a lot of different indicators in terms of AP tests, in terms of industrial credentials, in terms of ACT and SAT. Please remember that that is a year gap, a year lag time. So the F to the D really reflects from 2017 graduating class to 2018. Progress as well was an increase, and we're proud of that gain. But again, we're going to talk later about how we think that that is a very skewed measure. These were school grades, and we do want to recognize the different component grades. Can I get my PowerPoint? Can't see anymore. It's getting small. We had a number of schools achieve letter grades of A in one or more of the components, so we're very proud of those schools. We had Densler had an A in overall value added and also gap closing. Greenbrier had an A in progress. Green Valley an A in gap closing. Hillside an A in gap closing. I didn't reference gap closing too much earlier, but gap closing essentially means we want all of our students to eventually be achieving at a 100% level. We want all of our students to be achieving equally. And so what the state of Ohio has done is kind of calculate, so what does that mean for your students with disabilities? What type of gain do they need to make to actually close the gap with what are essentially white, non-disabled students? That's what gap closing reflects. Hillside had an A in gap closing. John Muir had an A in gap closing. Normandy had an A in graduation rate. Congratulations. And Ridgebrook had an A in gap closing. So we're very proud of those schools' contributions and specifically their achievements. Now here's where I'm gonna pine a little bit. The progress component, which again is 20% of our grade. So that is weighted more heavily than all of the other components except for achievement. The progress component is actually a calculation that is sold out to a company in North Carolina. Again, and Merle might know how many millions of dollars the state of Ohio has invested into that contract. SAS is a private company in North Carolina that computes EVAS. EVAS stands for the Educational Value Added Assessment Model. Now, I'm going to show you in a second the 25-page document. But in terms of transparency, in terms of being able to explain to parents and explain to teachers and explain to principals about how specifically we need to improve, take a look at this sentence. I'm just going to read just one example of the actual calculation. Note that C in equation 16 is not the same as C in equation 4. This matrix is estimated using the expectation maximization algorithm for estimating covariance matrices in the presence of missing data provided by the multiple imputation procedure in SAS stat, although no imputation is actually used. Clear, right? You know exactly what Johnny needs to read tonight to improve, right? Teachers know exactly how they need to improve that progress grade. Are you kidding me? Now, let's click on this just to give you a little bit of a feel. So we're going to need to click on this.
Or not.
So when you look up, how do I actually calculate 20% of my state report card grade, you're transferred to a 25-page document, and I'm going to show you just a few examples. So that's where it gets into more complex. But even in the first 10 to 12 pages that we scrolled through, you can see the complexity. My point here is that this completely lacks transparency. It gives absolutely no information to teachers and to principals and to parents in terms of how can I actually help my student make that growth. Here's what we have found out over the years. We used to think if you made 1 year's progress, you essentially got a C. If you made more than 1 year's progress, you essentially got a B or an A, depending on how much progress. If you were making less than that, you had a D or an F. It sort of made sense. What we have found out over the years of the progress model is it has nothing to do with actually making a year's growth. It means the state of Ohio using these complex algorithms that no one can understand puts students into groups. And they essentially put students into groups and put them in line. And they say, okay, you are all white students from middle income, inner ring suburbs of major cities. You're all in a line. And now we're going to put you through these complex algorithms. And by the way, they don't tell you how they weight the different variables. They don't tell you how race correlates to a variable. They don't tell you how income correlates to a value. They tell you it's in there, but they don't tell you exactly how that variable is. But they tell you you've got to hold your place in line. It has nothing to do with making a year's gain, a year's worth of growth or not. It has everything to do with holding your place in line in a system that is completely confusing and lacks any type of transparency. And yet, my friends, that is 20% of our report card grade. I'm going to advance now to some components that we think are more valuable. But I wanted to show you that because in terms of actually educating our public and educating our board, I think these equations are very telling in how the state of Ohio has decided to assess us, at least 20% of us. Go back to the PowerPoint. By the way, the state of Ohio also wants to evaluate teachers on that. That's 50% of some teachers' evaluations based on what types of classes they teach. That is a crime. That is unethical to not even release the actual formula of how we determine data, and yet we want to put teachers on improvement plans for that? Thank you for letting me opine. Now, what numbers actually matter? Because clearly I've done everything I could to completely debunk any legitimacy of the progress component. Performance index matters. In terms of what numbers we can actually influence, we can influence whether a kid passes the test or not. What you see here and what we're showing you is that each score equates to a point value in computing our performance index. So if you look above, you see on the left-hand side Advanced Plus. Advanced Plus is the highest level that our students could perform at. Our students who perform at an Advanced Plus level get a 1.3. So that's a very weighted grade. If you're proficient, which is always the goal, we want you to at least pass the test, right? That's a 1.0. Anything above proficient, you're starting to get more weighted on the points. Anything below proficient, and this is important too, the only time you actually get a 0 is if you don't take the test at all. So our administrators and our home liaisons and our counselors, they'll go out and pick kids up who are expelled, pick kids up who are suspended, because we got to get you in to take that test. If you take the test and put forward even a minimal effort, you can't just put your name on it. You got to do something else in the test. You're going to score at 0.3 for us, and that's a lot better than scoring at a 0. So we do everything we can to make sure that we have as few untested students as possible. When you add all of those points up, we had an 84.6. That was a C. The highest you can actually get is 120. So 84.6 is approximately 70.5% of our points. What we are trying to help our staff members understand is that we clawed our way to a C. Remember that old commercial about, I scratched and clawed my way up to the middle class? That's essentially what we did, but we are this close to falling back. We have no margin for error. Last year's grade as a performance index was a D, and that's a piece of what we always have to remember. We are that close. That's a couple dozen tests away from being in that D range again. Our last year's performance index was 83.9, so the advance to 84.6 got us into that C range. This is a statistic that we're also proud of. What you see is growth. And again, trying to emphasize that the performance index, because we can point to it and because we can clearly demonstrate, yes, I got Johnny at least even from the proficient to the accelerated level, or the accelerated to the advanced level, or the advanced level to the advanced plus level. That's growth. And that's reflected in that performance index. And that's what you see on this bar graph here. We have had gains from 2016 to 2019. Each of those report cards has showed gains on our performance index. We started out at an 81.2. We're now at an 84.6. The 90.4 on the left, you might say, well, what was the fall off? That was when we dramatically altered the rigor of our tests. And so that was a fall off that was consistent throughout the state. We also had 9 of our 14 schools increase their performance index. And again, that's our kids passing the tests and how well are they passing, at what rate are they passing. Congratulations to Renwood with a 6.2 performance index grade, even though I threatened to close the school. That's pretty impressive. Come on, I can get a little laugh out of that one. No? Still too early? Too raw? Normandy, 4.9 points. Densler, 4.4. Thorough Park, 3.5 point gain. Green Valley at 3.2, Valley Forge 2.3, Parma Senior High 1.9, Pleasant Valley 1.8, and Ridgebrook 1.5. Congratulations to those 9 schools who got more students to pass and more students to pass at higher levels, and that's how their performance index moved. We also want to recognize our career and technical education. In most districts, that isn't really an important grade because most districts share their career and technical education services with other districts through what's called a compact. We have, and we're very proud to have, all of our programs within our school district. So that grade belongs to us. The overall grade of a B is specific to the Parma City Schools. Within that, there are also components. B, in terms of achievement, and that's just based on standardized tests and also industrial certifications. The graduation rate, our students who are in career tech, are they graduating on time? We had a B for that. The career and post-secondary readiness was a C. The post-program outcomes was an A. And what that means is, are they leaving with some type of industrial credential? Is there something specific that they're stepping into so that they have a career or an apprenticeship? And we're obviously very proud of that A. Mrs. Plageman, or Miss Plageman, when she presents to the Board of Education, she'll further break that down so that we can better understand what that B symbolized. So that's an overview of where we were, and I appreciate your wait. Mrs. Stropko is going to talk about how do we continue to improve, because even though a report card is 1 point compared to that batting average in baseball, we still know that so many look at that report card grade as such an integral indicator of our school district's health. Mrs. Stropko?
Got to move this up. I'm taller. All right. I'm Mrs. Stropko. I'm the assistant superintendent.
Take your heels off.
Huh?
Take your heels off.
I'm the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction, and I have the best job in the district. I work with our teachers, I work with our administrators, and I get to see our students daily. And so I know Dr. Smialek was very passionate about the report card. My job is to make sure that we're moving in the right direction, specifically with the performance index. So we are talking a lot with our administrators about instructional leadership and setting that direction, developing our people within the building, building that efficacy, collective efficacy, teacher efficacy. And when our teachers are in a positive place and our support staff is in a positive place, it directly impacts our kids. Setting up organizations and system components and redesigning that so it's easy to do our job, and it's not that you need a manual to figure out how you're going to do A, B, and C, that it's all right there for everyone. And obviously improving our instructional program. So some of the organizational structures we currently have in place is monthly we meet with all of our administrators, and half of that meeting we focus on instructional leadership, and the other half is organizational health. We have our district leadership meeting. We had that today. It's typically 1 or 2 teacher representatives from each building along with our building principals. And there we talk about achievement and climate. Today we specifically completed a book study. We read the first 2 chapters. We modeled guided practice, and we came up with what we believe are the components for protocols within a TBT. It's not going to be what Mrs. Stropko believes, but what we collectively believe, so that what we're doing in our teacher-based team time and what we're doing in our collaborative groups is truly impacting student outcomes. Monthly, Dr. Smialek and I have principal check-in meetings. We have our elementary check-in meeting on Monday. We just completed our middle school check-in meetings. We extend our opportunities in the leadership meeting and DLT to meet one-on-one and in small group settings with our principals to add additional resources and support. And then obviously I am spending my days working with department chairs, curriculum liaisons, building principals, and aligning our curriculum, which is a big task. So to break down what our leadership meetings look like, we are using a universal walkthrough tool this year. We spent our entire summer figuring out what this walkthrough tool was going to look like as an entire leadership team. We worked with PEA and reviewed that walkthrough tool and reached consensus. And so this is...
It's the slide.
No, it's the right slide.
On my phone.
So this is our playbook, and our walkthrough tool directly aligns with our playbook. So when we're conducting walkthroughs as principals, as assistant principals, as deans, as central office, one of our roles is obviously evaluation, but that's not our only role. Our role is to be visible within those classrooms to make sure that we are understanding what is happening within those 4 walls. An example is I'm at Greenbrier Middle School. I have my entire administrative team. Today we decided we're going to walk through 5th grade ELA. We each take a classroom, we come out, we look at that tool, and we decide, okay, what does guided practice look like? Were the learning objectives similar? How did they adjust instruction? And then when I make an appearance in teacher-based team time, I know exactly what I'm talking about, and I could really help lead that group. And then ultimately using this tool to determine what our individualized professional development needs to look like, district-wide and at each level. So here are just examples of what the walkthrough tool looks like. Again, we want to know, is the learning target observed? Is success criteria communicated to our students? Are they demonstrating the learning target with specific evidence? And are they meeting mastery within the success criteria? We always check off what our lesson elements are. It could be 1, it could be many. And with the understanding that oftentimes we come in at different times of the instructional block. So if I'm coming in at the beginning, it's okay to just see clear learning objectives and possibly the anticipatory set. If I'm in the middle, I'm going to probably see guided practice. I'm going to see adjusting instruction. I might see some independent practice. So this is just to collect some data points to determine what we're seeing and how we can help support our teacher-based teams and our individual teachers so that they can do everything that they can to increase student outcomes. This is another example of what that walkthrough tool looks like. Our big focus this year is read, write, and discuss. So are we seeing that? Are we seeing it across content areas? And are our kids being exposed to read, write, and discuss in that authentic literacy fashion each and every day? So what are our kids doing? What is the teacher doing? And then every time we leave with a step and a star. So what is awesome about what we just saw, and what can we provide feedback? And sometimes it's just a question. Maybe it's, help me understand, or I wasn't understanding what did that instructional strategy, why was it going 15 minutes? What is the connection? So in our district leadership team, not only are we working with our teacher-based team protocols, but we just completed district goals at the elementary, middle, and high school, common goals, and then building action steps. This is just an example of one of our district goals at our high school level. So on here, one of our achievement goals is to improve the math performance indicators by 10 percentage points. And a climate goal is to decrease suspensions for 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. We didn't just pick 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. We looked at discipline data to determine where our high pockets of either suspensions, in-school interventions, or emergency removals might occur. What were those discipline infractions, and how can we wrap around those kids, which I'll talk about in a minute. I talked about our book study. For the achievement side, we're reading Data Team's Experience. And then on the climate side, we're reading Carrots and Sticks, a restorative justice piece. So this is really exciting because we have our school improvement plans, we have our action steps, but now we're taking research and we're providing research to incorporate into our action steps. So for example, today in our district leadership team meeting, we read in a jigsaw fashion chapters 1 and 2. And on there, we had each group present their key findings. And then our DLT member and our principal got together and they did a carousel brainstorming, and they walked around and they determined what's the one piece of evidence that I'm going to put in my school improvement plan, and I'm going to communicate to my building leadership team now until we meet again the next time. And then at that point in time, we will revise and continue our plan. So we plan to read both of these books as a district leadership team from now until the end of the year. As we are meeting with our principals, I said we're meeting with elementary on Monday. We just had our middle school. We are constantly reviewing these 4 agenda items. So we're always reviewing walkthrough data. We're discussing who our experts are. We are planning support for our BLT and TBTs, and we're creating individualized PD plans. This walkthrough tool is not an I gotcha. This walkthrough tool is a growth mindset tool, and it really is meant to improve instruction and to really hone in on those instructional strategies that we are excelling at and how we can continue to grow that within a building and district-wide. So this is just an example of some of the data points that we talk about. Here's another example. This is our elements directly linked to our playbook. So this is just a screenshot of just the last month at one building and what we're seeing. And again, it could be, the administrative team, they're meeting together and they're like, you know what? All of these walkthroughs, I went in at the beginning of the learning block. I really need to see that independent practice, so maybe I need to adjust my time. So again, it's just, continuing to have those data points to improve student outcomes. We are on a corrective action plan, and that is because we have disparities with suspensions, in-school interventions, and emergency removals. And it directly impacts our various subgroups. What the heck is going on? So we are meeting with our levels at different tiers. Mr. Hoon, our director of Office of Exceptional Students, and I just met with high school. We went there individually. I love that. We met with the administrative teams and we talked about how is their PBIS team? Where are they at? What does their agenda look like? We talked about what they're currently implementing for common behavior expectations, routines, and language. We talked about what suspensions looked like last year compared to this year. We looked at individual kids. We talked about individual kids' stories. We talked about individual intervention plans for those kids. So if we were seeing some kiddos that were suspended this year that also had high suspension rates last year, we want to know what is the reason why. And we will continue to meet with them monthly. They're on our calendar for the entire year. And there we will talk about trends, strengths, weaknesses, and next steps. And probably one of the highlights of my career. I wish when I was a building principal, I had that team to wrap around and just kind of talk about, because at times when you have those frequent flyers that you're constantly seeing for discipline, you need a lot of support and you need a lot of different ideas, because our job is to educate. And so we had some great discussions. We highlight our agenda and we will continue to add to it. So when it's time to upload our evidence, it's already there. But I truly believe that these action steps are going to impact our suspension rates. So finally, aligning curriculum and assessment practices. I'm in the talk, collaborate, and listen with department chairs, and Amy is doing curriculum liaisons. We are looking at all tested area curriculum maps, making sure that those are revised, they're linked to our standards, and that we have some common assessments. If not common assessments, then common formative practices. We're talking about what intervention looks like, but also enrichment. I think sometimes we worry so much about the kids that are struggling that we forget about the kids that are already at benchmark and what we need to do to enrich. So we're really focusing on that and looking at our gifted students and looking at, if they're coming in at advanced, how do we get them to advanced plus? How do we continue to grow our kids? We're looking at our STEM extensions, our AP, our honors, and our gifted. And then focusing on college and career readiness for K through 12. Again, authentic literacy, read, write, and discuss. Our STEM expansion, we added 6th grade. Enrichment opportunities in prevention, intervention, and enrichment time. And focusing that really in our learning labs at the middle school. We have this time, some of you may agree with me that a learning lab, that's a long time for kids. We'd really like to have some other opportunities, but we have what we have right now, and we're really trying to provide some authentic practices within that time, such as intervention and enrichment. College Credit Plus, we want to increase our opportunities by bringing it into our buildings. Why do we continue to send our kids out? Getting some of our educators trained in this practice so that our kids can get dual credit. Advanced placement, we're working with all of our teachers right now. College Board has new curriculum, and so making sure that it's aligned and that we're using the new tools. And then again, working with Mrs. Plagman with industry credentialing. Right now, 90% of our CTE courses have an industry credential, and we have approximately 40% of our seniors that are accessing a CTE program. So all good things that we're going to continue to expand upon.
So we'll take questions if anybody has them.
Okay, I do actually have one. Based on a lot of these numbers, and I don't want to expand on a meeting, it's been pretty lengthy already. So if they were to use only one component out of all 6 of those in the calculation of the grades, is it possible that it would skew in either direction, a positive or negative placement of where our school lies now?
Yeah, it's very similar to how I talked about batting average being an example, right? If you only look at batting average, you're missing a lot of other pieces. If you only took one number out of that whole report card, that would be like taking a 3-game stretch and taking what somebody's batting average was over 3 games instead of 162. I mean, there's so much data that goes into that. So the use of any one indicator is particularly dangerous.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Excellent. Thank you so much. We know the presentation got lengthy, but we do really want to emphasize, where we have been, which is our report card grade this year, but also where we plan to go and all of the systems that we have in place to guarantee improvement. So thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.